Krishna. Dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books right here in the live studios in Hythe, Kent, Southeast England, right next to the English Channel, otherwise translated as the Haven. That's Hythe in Anglo-Saxon is called Haven. So this is the safe haven. We hope that all of you out there in cyberspace who are watching are safe and well and happy and enjoying being in the safe haven of this atmosphere. We had guests yesterday, a very sophisticated, professional actress and her husband, Davide. Her name is Ragaleka. She's an initiated disciple of mine. And she just loved the atmosphere in this place. And she also heard the samples of the audiobook, and she went over the moon. She has her own school, by the way, of teaching how to act and how to speak and how to do drama. So she thought that it was a winner. So I had a very blissful day yesterday about that. So okay, let's get right to it. We're a little bit late today. Not too late, but a little. Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami to sanctify the atmosphere and prepare us for what we're about to hear. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kali Dvandodita Aditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Savasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Manistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadhutadayin Atini Chochatakada Hanamun Chagadachin Mam Premna Rit Kantayokspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Alright, Krishna is enlightening Arjuna in the Bhagavad-gita. Srila Prabhupada is further enlightening us in his Bhaktivedanta purports to the Bhagavad-gita as it is. Chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge. Beginning with text 20. Tyaktva karma pala sangam nitya tripto nirashayaha karmanya viparito pi naiva kinchit karoti saha. abandoning all attachments to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Purport. This freedom from the bondage of actions is possible only in Krishna consciousness, when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad actions, or good and bad. Read it again. Sorry. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of ācārya, or actions without fruitive reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before. Text 21. Nidashir yatachittatma chakta sarva parigraha sharidam kevalam karma kurvan napnoti kilbisham. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Purport. A Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it does not move of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna-conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly as a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna-conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna-conscious person, fully engaged in self-realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not therefore become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. Text 22. Yadrich cha labat santushto. Again. Yadrich cha labasantushto dvanvati to vimatsaraha samak siddhava siddhaucha kritvapi nadibhadyate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Purport. A Krishna-conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power, and he is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not accept engagement in anyone's service if it might hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna-conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady, both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. Text 23. Gata sangyasya muktasya jnanavastita chetasaha jagyaya charita karma samagram pravaliyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Purport. Becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice aims I'll read it again. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Krishna or Vishnu. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. Text 24. Brahmarpanam brahmahabir brahmagnau brahmanahutam brahmaiva taintagantavyam brahmakarma samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul engaged in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely yogurt. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahma, Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of His transcendental body are called Brahmajyoti, His spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahmajyoti, but when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. The offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the Absolute Truth, regains its spiritual quality. I repeat that. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the Absolute Truth, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the Absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer, or leader of the performance, and the result, or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Text 25. Daivameva pare yagyam yoginak prayupasate brahmagnava pare yagyam yagyanaivo Jejubati. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi, or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman, or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factually, sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, who is also known as yajna. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. while others, who want some temporary material happiness, sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods, such as Indra, the sun god, and so on. And others, who are impersonalists, sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions, like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bhavishwara Badi, or believers in many gods. But others, who worship the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire and thus end their individual existences. By merging into the existence of the Supreme, such impersonalists sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifices his material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna conscious person, like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions, as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus, he is the first-class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. Text 26. Shotradin inriyanyanye samyamyagni Jejubati Shabdadin Vishayananya Indriyagni Jejubati. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Purport. The members of the four divisions of human life, namely the brahmacharis, the grihastas, the vanaprasthas, and the sannyasis, are all meant to become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the four orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis, or students under the care of a bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Hare Namanukirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Similarly, the householders who have some license for sense gratification perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies of human society, but a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratification. Marriage on the principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society, because that is the way for restricted sex life. This restricted, unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna, because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency toward sense gratification for higher transcendental life. Text 27. Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapade atma samyama yogagno juvati jnana dipite. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Purport. The yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyag Atma and Parag Atma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, he is called Parag Atma. But as soon as this same soul becomes detached from such sense enjoyment, it is called Pratyag Atma. The soul is subjected to the functions of 10 kinds of air at work within the body, and this is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjali system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner, so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to this yoga system, Pratyag Atma is the ultimate goal. The Pratyag Atma is withdrawn from activities in matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, eyes for seeing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, hand for touching, and all of them are thus engaged in activities outside the self. They are called the functions of the pranavayu. The apanavayu goes downwards. The vyanavayu acts to shrink and expand. Samanavayu adjusts equilibrium. Udanavayu goes upwards. And when one is enlightened, one engages in all these in searching for self-realization. Text 28. Dravya jagyastapo jagya yoga jagyastapade swadhyaya jnana jagyascha yatayak Sangshita Vrataha. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Purport. These sacrifices may be fitted into various divisions. There are persons who are sacrificing their possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. In India, the rich mercantile community or princely orders open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Anakshetra, Atitishala, Anatalaya, and Vidyapit. In other words, in other countries too, there are many hospitals, old age homes, and similar charitable foundations meant for distributing food, education, and medical treatment free to the poor. All these charitable activities are called Dravyamaya Yajna. There are others who, for higher elevation in life or for promotion to higher planets within the universe, voluntarily accept many kinds of austerities, such as Chandrayana and Chaturmasya. These processes entail severe vows for conducting life under certain rigid rules. For example, under the Chaturmasya vow, the candidate does not shave for 4 months during the year, July to October. He does not eat certain foods, does not eat twice in a day, or does not leave home. Such sacrifice of the comforts of life is called Tapomaya Yajna. There are still others who engage themselves in different kinds of mystic yogas, like the Patanjali system for merging into the existence of the Absolute, or Hatha Yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, for particular perfections. And some travel to all these sanctified places of pilgrimage. All these practices are called Yoga Yajna, sacrifice for a certain type of perfection in the material world. There are others who engage themselves in the studies of different Vedic literatures, specifically the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras, or the Sankhya philosophy. All of these are called Swadhyaya Yajna, or engagement in the sacrifice of studies. All these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above-mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. Text 29. Apane juvati pranam, prane panam tatapade, pranapanagati rudva, pranayama parayanaha, apade niyatakara, pranat praneshu juvati. Still others, who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, practice by following the movement, practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming, and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Simple thing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Purport. This system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama. And in the beginning, it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. All of these processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual realization. This practice involves controlling the airs within the body so as to reverse the directions of their passage. The apana air goes downward and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized into puraka, equilibrium. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called rechaka. When both currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in kumbhaka yoga. By practice of Kumbhaka Yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection in spiritual realization. The intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life without waiting for the next. Thus, by practicing Kumbhaka Yoga, the yogis increase their duration of life by many, many years. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always situated in the transcendental loving service of a Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. His senses being always engaged in the service of the Lord. His senses being always engaged in the service of Krishna have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So at the end of life, he naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation, as stated in Bhagavad-gita 14:26. Myam mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati jaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord transcends the modes of material nature and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. A Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage, and he is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna prasadam, or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control. And without sense control, there is no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. Text 45. Text 30, I'm sorry. Sarve pyagye, sarve pyete jaggivido, yagya chapatakal mashaha, yagya sa shishtamrita bhujo, yanti brahmasanatanam. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and, having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance toward the supreme, eternal atmosphere. Purport. From the foregoing explanation of different types of sacrifice, namely sacrifice of one's possessions, study of the Vedas or philosophical doctrines, and performance of the yoga system, it is found that the common aim of all is to control the senses. Sense gratification is the root cause of material existence. Therefore, unless and until one is situated on a platform apart from sense gratification, there is no chance of being elevated to the eternal platform of full knowledge, full bliss, and full life. This platform is in the eternal atmosphere, or Brahman atmosphere. All the above-mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. By this advancement in life, not only does one become happy and opulent in this life, but also at the end, he enters into the eternal kingdom of God, either merging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's 7:47. We'll stop there. We'll start again tomorrow at text 31. So if anybody has any reflections, any point that we heard today that stuck into their mind, please be our guest.
First is something from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Yes, Gopakanya Devi Dasi. Haribol.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj and all friends. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Haribol. Glories to His divine grace.
And from Bhakta Rupa.
Haribol Bhakta Rupa.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your service. It's amazing how quickly we forget about these lessons of detachment. It seems like I'm in a cycle of hearing and working for Krishna's pleasure, gradually becoming complacent and slowly becoming hyper-fruitive and miserable again. Then, by hearing from Prabhupada, I'm again reminded to work for Krishna's satisfaction, and so the cycle continues. When will the day come? When will the day come when I don't forget Krishna? I long for that day. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Well, that's the end of the Gita, isn't it? The conclusion of the Gita. Krishna says He gives all these up, all these relative ways of improving oneself in so many ways, and at the end He says Sarva Dharma Parityajya Mame Kam Sharanam. We surrender to Krishna only, then we're free from all of those things. And Krishna personally protects us from all the reactions and all these problems, and we don't worry. We stop worrying. This is full Krishna consciousness, when we do things for Krishna, but don't forget. That's the point. So when will it stop? It'll stop when you stop desiring sense gratification. And when will you stop desiring sense gratification? When you become actually saturated or fed up, I guess is the word, with the fact that it never satisfies me. At some point along that trajectory, after many, many births and many, many lives and many, many attempts at enjoying the senses and getting further and further complications and suffering, eventually the soul will begin to question why. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. This is the human form of life. So here we are, very fortunate. We've reached the human form of life, and we've actually woken up to the point where at least we can question. We can question properly, and get the answers we're getting. And so when is up to you. It's up to each one of us. As long as we keep mixing, our desires for sense gratification with our service, then we won't feel completely satisfied. And when we do, then we will become completely satisfied. I mean, I know it sounds simple. The application is difficult, but it's simple nonetheless. Hare Krishna.
Sudevi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Sudevi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hari Bo.
From Gopal Champu.
Gopal Champu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear Keshava Bharati Maharaj.
Long time no hear. Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances. Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
How can we understand if we are doing things for our own sense gratification versus for Krishna's pleasure?
Because you become completely satisfied. When you do things for Krishna's pleasure, only for Krishna's pleasure, then you become satisfied. You become actually satisfied. And not just all of you. Your senses, your mind, your intelligence, your body, yourself. Everything becomes satisfied. And then, although we perceive the fluctuations of the material nature, as we heard in one of the purports that we read today, those things go on, but the soul is not involved in them. He's not, how do you say, preoccupied by them. He does them in order to stay fit so he can do his service to Krishna. So you'll know when you're satisfied. That doesn't mean that when you do something for the satisfaction of your senses, that means that Krishna is satisfied. It means when you do something for the satisfaction of Krishna's senses, you become satisfied and your senses become satisfied. But that takes practice and time and patience and determination and all those things that we're instructed by our previous acharyas. As they say, practice makes perfect. You don't become perfect at anything unless you practice properly. They have a school of violin, learning violin. It's called the Stradivarius School of Violin. And they charge the fee more the more you've studied under another system, because they have to untrain or unteach you the habits that you've developed by playing the violin in a different way than their technique, which is the highest technique. So it's like that, Prabhupada told us. We've been conditioned for a very long time, therefore we have habits, and we have to change our habits. We have to change our conceptions, and that takes time and practice under proper direction. And that's why Prabhupada stressed so much his books, because his books give the proper direction and the proper trains of thought that give us the proper conceptions. Why shouldn't it be the most difficult thing? It's the highest thing. It's the greatest thing. It's the most important thing. If it takes so much time to learn how to play the violin, or, I don't know, run track, or whatever, do politics, or whatever, why should it not take practice and time and great endeavor to do the thing that gets us, that brings us the highest goal, the perfection of life? And that's the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, because he gave us a path toward the perfection of life, which doesn't require all of these different kinds of sacrifice that we've just heard about, which are all bona fide ways of performing sacrifice, but they result in so much effort and so much austerity and difficulty. And Lord Chaitanya made it easy because he had to make it easy for this age. We're so confused and so unfortunate. Hare Krishna.
Next is from Rati Manjari.
Haribo Rati.
Jai Guru Maharaj. Running behind you, stumbling, and getting up again. Your mixed but hopeful servant, Rati Manjari Devi Dasi.
Well, anyway, from over here, it looks like you're doing pretty good. We can't see all the details, but every time you send us out these videos of you leading a whole bunch of people on Sankirtan, and they're obviously following your lead, yeah, we see who you are. You can't hide from us.
More from Bhaktirupa.
Haribo Bhaktirupa.
He says, I liked the line, quote, hearing is the basic principle for understanding, unquote, from 426.
Yeah, you don't, everything we learn through hearing, everything, from a baby down to the old man. Hare Krishna.
There's a comment from Bhaktamatsu.
Hare Krishna, Bhaktamatsu.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to your most revered spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada.
Hari Bol Jai, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
It's amazing how relishable Prabhupada's purports always are, despite fluctuations in consciousness from a day-to-day basis. In contrast, I feel as a neophyte aspiring sadhaka that my japa vrat is a lot more difficult to maintain with taste. But these Bhaktivedanta purports are consistently nectar, despite not having any actual adhikar.
That's because they help you to think properly. If you're actually following the words, just like if you're having a conversation with someone that is dear to you, you know, you have to listen to what they're saying and respond. Otherwise, every time they speak, you'll go, huh? What? Huh? What? You're not paying attention. So in that sense, reading the books, especially when you hear them out loud, engage the mind automatically in the proper trains of thought. And when you're doing your japa, it's easy for your mind to do other things while you're trying to chant your japa. So therefore, it's called, in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna calls it the supreme sacrifice. Japa. That's why it's given as one of the 5 vows. Chant 16 rounds every day, at least, and follow the 4 regulated principles, or avoid them. Avoid the sinful principles of material life, the root causes. It's not so easy as it may seem in the beginning to chant properly, with our mind focused on the sound and our hearts going out to the Lord in constant oblations and giving of ourselves. That's why the goal of chanting is to actually perceive that the holy name of the Lord and the Lord are the same. Minatmam namanamino. The name is not different than the Lord. Namachintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddho Nityamukto Binatmam Namanamino. If we're meditating on what the Lord's names are, or what the holy name of the Lord is, while we chant, then we won't have so much trouble. And it all comes back down to the whole purpose of sacrifice, which is to control the mind. Bhaktivedanta Thakur said, if you can beg for the holy name of the Lord, it's the right thing to beg for, pure chanting of the holy name. You have to be a humble servant. You have to realize through experience that you don't know anything. And the holy name knows everything. Krishna knows everything. So it's advised that we give up mechanical chanting by giving up the offenses to the holy name. And then we will no longer struggle to chant. We'll like to chant. We won't be able to stop chanting. Hare Krishna.
Rati Manjari says, I will spare you the daily details. Thank you for believing in me.
Thank you, Rati. Hare Krishna. Whatever you go through, it's obvious that you're attached to the holy name and chanting the holy name and helping others to get a taste for chanting the holy name. It's obvious. Just keep doing it, even if you can't do it 24/7 yet. Just keep doing it as much as you can. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much for all these wonderful reflections and discussions for this very important section of the Bhagavad Gita, wherein Krishna explains to us the various methods of sacrifice that are undertaken by different people in different levels of understanding. Even when we get trained by our mothers, they teach us better to give than to receive. Better to give than you receive, from our original gurus, our mothers. Because why? Because it feels better to give something to someone than to receive from someone. That is the basic principle of sacrifice. And when the object of sacrifice becomes Krishna, then it transforms into a transcendental activity which satisfies the soul. Lesson for the day. The methods of sacrifice that end in full Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad-gita As It Is, Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Glories to the assembled devotees. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same topic, as Krishna enlightens us further and further through his holy words, the holy song, the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, with Prabhupada's chorus explaining everything to us in a way that we have to understand. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.